This video shares the story about my wisdom teeth removal abroad. If you've never imagined such a thing as wallet-friendly dentistry, I think you will feel differently after hearing this. Watch to the end for the 4 big takeaways and lessons learned from this fantastic dental experience. It all began about 5 months prior, when I first started having tooth pains anytime I ate on the right side of my mouth. The pain kept getting worse, and finally, I knew I had to address it sooner rather than later and deal with this prior to beginning our full-time nomadic travels. According to the first dentist I consulted, there were several issues. The biggest one, she claimed, was that a wisdom tooth was crowding my mouth, causing the discomfort. I had never heard of a wisdom tooth crowding one's mouth after renting space just fine in there for decades. She said it would take about an hour or more for the tooth extraction surgery, and that since it involved general anesthesia, I'd have to stop eating the night before and then stay at the office for a while after surgery to recuperate and to take anti-nausea medication to keep me from vomiting and to have someone drive me back home. Ugh. When I asked about the cost, she would not give an answer, but instead said that the billing person would come in to discuss that. Why couldn't she just tell me? Doesn't their office do wisdom tooth extractions all the time? So anyway, she left, and the billing professional then came in with pages of itemized charges. Separate fees for the anesthesia, the anesthesiologist, the orthodontist, the medical materials, the disposal of the medical materials. They charge for throwing stuff away. Why can't they just give me the materials? I'm happy to drop them in the garbage myself for free. So the total was really expensive, but if I paid an annual fee to become a member of their dentistry, I could get wisdom teeth extracted for the bargain price of $1,000 each. Okay, so I went and got a second opinion. And while the second dentist seemed more competent and more professional, the cost for extracting 2 wisdom teeth was about the same, a little over $2,000. He said that I really should remove the pair of wisdom teeth because they do not do well with no support from the other wisdom tooth above or below. Okay, that's fine. I'd heard that for years from a number of orthodontists. Nothing unusual there. I decided to postpone dealing with the wisdom teeth, but I did get a couple of small fillings at the office of the second dentist, since he said that those little cavities were the reason that I was having tooth pains and not from a wisdom tooth crowding your mouth. So I got those little fillings done since that was supposed to stop the pain. However, it didn't. Quite the opposite, in fact, because shortly after those cavities were filled, I woke up one morning and my tongue was burning. It felt as if I had just swallowed some scalding soup or scalding coffee, even though I had had neither one for days, if not more. So I called the dentist and he recommended some special, gentler, pricier mouthwash that was supposed to make the burning sensation stop. But it didn't. And it lasted for months, and I seriously thought that my tongue would never stop burning because that burning sensation started on the tip of my tongue and flared up, moving all the way down my throat over time. It was crazy. So I was not in the end feeling much confidence in the second dental clinic either. So I decided to try to wait on the wisdom teeth until we began our nomadic travel, figuring that things couldn't possibly get any worse in another country. So here's what happened. The burning tongue thing, by the way, finally stopped after several months, but the tooth pain that I was originally having got worse during our cruise to Europe, where we were soon to begin our nomadic travel abroad. So at that point, I had to do something as soon as possible once we reached our first destination, which was Albufeira in the Algarve region of Portugal. Well, at least dumb luck was a little bit on my side because we had totally by happenstance rented a B&B right next to a tiny commercial strip of maybe just half a dozen offices and storefronts, and one of them happened to be not just a dental practice, but one with a lot of ratings and very high ratings. We hadn't quite figured out our phone situation just yet, so our ability to phone and text was a little bit difficult. So we just walked into the office. Holy cow. First of all, with no appointment, I explained the issue to the front desk, and they said I could just wait a little and that the dentist would see me in between clients. But it just happened to be the day of that massive power outage from the spring of 2025 that shut everything down, not just in Albufeira, but also throughout Portugal, Spain, and even parts of the south of France. So it was chaotic, but still, the dentist met with me for a consult. I explained the situation, we discussed, and then she told me I could return once the power came back on and she would see me for real. And that ended up being the following day. By the way, they did not charge for that initial consult. So I went back the following day, they did x-rays, and they confirmed what I had thought, which was that wisdom teeth don't just stop fitting in your mouth. However, the x-rays did reveal a big black cavity in that one wisdom tooth. And that's what was causing the pain, not the wisdom tooth crowding my mouth and not those little cavities in the front teeth. This made so much more sense. So first, she gave me a prescription for strong antibiotics because a huge hole like that, abscessing, can have dire consequences. Next, I asked her about the cost for a pair of wisdom teeth extractions, since everyone seems to be saying that it's the optimal way to take out a wisdom tooth is to take out the pair. So I just went ahead and asked her for the cost of the pair. She did not run out of the office, and she did not send in the billing expert with a list of charges split into a dozen categories. She simply answered the question. The fee would be a whopping €200. That's it. Not 2,000, 200. The euro was worth a bit more than the US dollar, and so €200 equaled approximately $215, or about 1/10 the cost of the same procedure that was quoted to me twice in the United States. But it gets crazier. In Portugal, this was not going to be an hour of surgery. Every time I asked the Portuguese dentist how long the procedure would take, she would respond with, well, and it's done. I had no idea what that meant, but I soon found out, and that was another whopper. But next, she said to eat breakfast within the hour just before the procedure. Now, I found that odd until she explained that they use no general anesthesia. She insisted it would all be fine with a local. Now, I have never heard of that for a wisdom tooth extraction in the US. If you have and you've had a different experience like that, share it below. I'd love to hear about it. So anyway, I took the antibiotics for a week, and next I had my extraction appointment. Just wow. First, the orthodontist was so nice. He and I were making small talk while we were waiting for the numbness to set in. And then at one point, he looked at me and said, "You're nervous, aren't you?" And I said, yeah, I was, because for months I had been led to believe that this was a big, awful ordeal. So he kept chatting, and then he segued into a pretty in-depth reminiscence of his time traveling through the Algarve, how he chose Albufeira for his home, all kinds of stuff about the region, and this went on for about 30 minutes until suddenly he stopped mid-sentence and studied my face and said, "You're not nervous now." And I was a little startled, and I said, "You're right." And he said, "Yeah, I did all that talking till I could see that you weren't thinking about the extractions anymore. Okay, good. Open mouth, please." So I opened my mouth, and I felt this. Tap, tap, tap. And then he said, "Oh, it broke. Half of it's still there. Open again." So I opened, and again. Tap, tap, tap. And then he said, "Yeah, good, good. Okay, now the other. Open." I opened my mouth, and again. Tap, tap, tap. And then he said, "Okay, that's that." So I asked, "What's what? So we're ready to start now?" And he said, "No, that's that." And I said, "Well, what's that's that mean?" He said, "We're done." I couldn't believe it. So I asked him to show me the teeth, and he did. And I saw the huge black cavity they were talking about that they found on the x-ray. How the previous dentists failed to see that on their x-rays flabbergasts me because it had to have been there. That's what was causing the pain. And the way that I know that is that the moment the tooth was out, all that tooth pain was finally gone. And thank God that huge hole never abscessed. Even seeing the holes in my mouth where my teeth had been, I simply could not believe that that was the entire procedure done in less than 60 seconds. That was why the initial dentist in that Portuguese dental clinic kept saying, well, how long does it take? Well, he just, and that's it. That's why. It literally was a matter of seconds, and it could not have been simpler. And imagine, the orthodontist, remember, spent 30 minutes speaking with me beforehand just so I would not feel scared for a few seconds. And when I went to pay, I realized that we had left our credit cards at home. So we explained that we were just next door and we promised we would come right back, not even in 5 minutes. And the front desk responded with, oh, that's fine. You'll be back next week to have your stitches removed. You can just pay then. They were fine with us waiting a week. They didn't make sure we paid before anything got done. The stitch removal, by the way, was also free, just like the initial consultation. And by the way, we did go back and pay a few minutes later. We appreciated their kindness, but the work was done and it was fair that we pay them at that time. So we did. The whopping 200 euros, about a tenth of the US price, the easiest procedure imaginable, compassion, no pain, and I didn't have a bill in my face that required immediate payment before the procedure would be done. And all local anesthesia, no unnecessary general sedation, no nausea, blah, blah, blah. And by the way, now that I've been through this, it begs the question, what in the world is an orthodontist doing for an hour when removing wisdom teeth can be completed in seconds? And there's more. The orthodontist put in stitches and then gave me 3 post-op instructions. First, eat lots of ice cream. Second, use cold compresses for 4 hours. And third, gargle with warm salt water followed by cold water for a few days. He explained that it's actually the cold water that kills the bacteria. The hot salt water, he explained, dries out and shrinks the bacteria, so then the cold water causes them to expand and burst. It sounded like hot salt water gargling costs less money than mouthwash and does a better job. Oh, and I can't believe I almost forgot. No pain from the extractions. I was all set with my box of heavy-duty ibuprofen, which, by the way, they could get me in a powder form since I told them I don't like swallowing pills. Do they even have that in the US? I'd never heard of it. Anyway, I got my powder and I used just 1/2 of one, pill-sized amount of ibuprofen, but I really was never in much pain. And most of the time I was in no pain at all with nothing but a local anesthetic. So here's me smiling just a couple of hours after the procedure. Now I want to draw your attention to a few key things. First, I don't look like a blowfish, which is exactly how everybody I have ever seen looks after getting wisdom teeth pulled. My cheek isn't swollen. Second, I'm happy. I never had such a nice experience at a dental office. And third, look closely at my front tooth, the one on the left. You see that split running through the middle? I had had that crack for years, ever since a poorly done filling shrunk shortly after it was put in, and even worse, it was a poor attempt to match the tooth's shade of white, leaving me looking kind of like a drunken pirate with a rotting front tooth. I never fixed it because I had grown so accustomed to discussing any cosmetic issue with any dentist and then despairing every time they gave me the cost. So I thought I would always be stuck with that cracked tooth right in the center of my mouth. Well, it turned out that the Albufeira dentist found a cavity in the back of that tooth, and she said that since the back cavity was on that same cracked tooth, that she would do the whole tooth for the price of the one filling and not charge extra to fix the front of the tooth. So the entire cost for the back cavity, removing the current filling on the front and refilling the front and making the shade of white to match my tooth color, all of this for €80, which was about $85. So once again, here's the before photo and here's now. This dentist took 45 minutes on the front of the tooth to ensure that the color would be a perfect match so that the filling would never be obvious anymore. By the way, for what it's worth, in this particular dental practice, each dentist only performs one job so that they can be an expert in that one area and leave everything else to another specialist. I never saw that before, and it seemed to work amazingly well. And again, everyone in the entire office was just as nice and helpful as they could be. I can't stress that enough. So the next time I need something medical/dental and I'm abroad, I won't feel so concerned about not being in the States. In fact, I'm sure I will be concerned anytime I need something done while I am in the States. So to recap my expat dental experience, number one, it is real what everybody says. Healthcare costs abroad are much lower. And it's not just Portugal. I've had other experiences. I once went to a hospital in a little town in Italy with severe abdominal pains. I felt so sick and it came out of nowhere. The hospital checked me out and hooked me up on an IV, and I never knew what was in it. All I knew was I had been feeling extremely sick and in excruciating pain. And after the IV, I felt great 20 minutes later. The hospital had me come back in the morning for a follow-up. All was fine, and there was never a bill for anything. Another time, I once had to see a doctor in Paris. I needed some tests done, and then I had to go back for a second appointment to discuss the results. The doctor was very generous with her time, and the second appointment lasted for 2 hours with her patiently educating me about what the results meant and what I should do moving forward. And again, there was no bill. So it is real what everybody says. Number two, healthcare abroad is not just body health, it is also mental health. Compassion is as important as the physical care. Number three, healthcare abroad is integrity. I didn't have to ask the dentist/tooth color specialist to please do a good job because this was one of my front teeth. She just did it. She took whatever time it took until the color matched perfectly with my tooth. And number four, healthcare does not have to include a mountain of stress. When asked about the cost, they state the cost, not a never-ending, constantly evolving number of, yeah, well, you paid the establishment and you paid the doctor, but now you have to pay for the pad of note paper that the doctor wrote your prescription on, and the pen and the ink, and there's no games. So that's my story and what I learned from my most recent medical experience abroad at a little dental clinic in the city of Albufeira in the south of Portugal. If you have a medical story that you'd like to share, drop a comment below. And if you like this video and would like to see more videos to help answer your questions about your travels to come, please like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.